And should we win the day, the 12th of January will no longer be known as a wild card holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. This is our underdog's day. And survive they did as the Commanders, still the literal worst name, got the W as the only true wild card of the weekend, with the rest of the games being blowouts in favor of the division winners. You may have noticed that intro wasn't from Lord of the Rings. Well, that's because Lord of the Rings is a fantasy, and for the next few weeks, this is no longer a fantasy football podcast, but an actual football podcast. So I thought I'd pick a movie based on a true story, like Independence Day. I am your host, Alex the Shark Sparks, and joining me as always, the man who actually forgot what time we record these, even though it's our 18th episode. Give it up for Mitch, Kirk Cousins Fan Club President Black, and our super helpful producer. You had one job, Vinny Santucci. Say hello to all the residents out there, fellas.
Hello.
What up, gang? In case anybody doesn't understand the reference, it's that I am never the one that schedules it or produces this show. So by title, I don't do my job at all.
And just by non-title, I guess I was just double checking or double confirming the time. It wasn't like I forgot, but sure.
Fair
Is anyone
enough.
staring at my screen?
And
Well, I'm not looking at your screen for obvious reasons.
Oh, I thought I was sharing on everyone. It's okay, no worries.
Oh,
How is everyone doing?
and
How
we
is
just lost Vinny again. So, Mitch, I'm doing all right. How about you, bud?
I'm chilling. I'm doing great. I was fun watching the playoffs, meaningful football games. Not having to stress about my fantasy team. It's nice.
sorry, boys. Apparently, in 2025, you still can't have high quality internet connection. Um, I
Oh,
keep dropping.
don't even get me started. My internet in my area is only like one service provider. They don't offer anything past like 500 megabytes of speed. And every time I'm like, when are you guys going to update? And they're like, oh, we can't because of the surrounding area. And it's just one internet provider. They just don't give a crap. It's terrible. Anyways,
All right. Well, I guess we should get to it. This was Wild Card Weekend, and quite frankly, it was not very wild. As I mentioned in the intro, the only quote unquote wild card team to win was the Commanders, and I say that vaguely because I mean there were definitely teams with better records that were division winners versus wild cards, or excuse me, better wild card teams with better records than division winners. But all the home teams that were division winners got the W, and they all got them in blowout fashion. None of the games were close except for the Commanders Bucks game, which came down to a doinker at the end. Um, so we can just kind of go around the horn here. Like I said, not going to talk about fantasy football because I not really love it, but we'll talk about the games themselves and then get to NFL news. So we'll go in order here. First, Chargers Texans. Man, did the Chargers lay an egg. And fun fact, Herbert threw 3 interceptions during the regular season this year. He threw 4 in this game. So talk about having a rough outing for Justin Herbert. Did you guys happen to watch this game? I kind of fell asleep because it's so boring. Um, but yeah, any thoughts on that game?
no, I mean, I thought sadly that was like one of the better games of the weekend. It's like there wasn't very many good games this week.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of turnovers for lots of teams. Okay, so if we have nothing to say about the it looks like Vinny's back again for a second time. Um, and he's gone again. So yeah, this is gonna be a weird podcast, I guess. Next game up, Steelers Ravens. That game only ended up being a two-score game, but it wasn't that close. The Steelers didn't score in the first half. They were down 21-0. Scored a couple times in the second half, but yeah. Any comments there
Yeah,
about these
I
games?
think I'm back. Woo woo.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, had to join from my phone. I don't know what's going on, but anyways, I'm not sure what we talked about. I did hear Steelers Ravens, and let me tell you, I actually looked at all the games that were on Saturday, and as a true sports fan, I thought if there's a day to run errands, it's today and not Sunday because the games on Saturday were kind of trash. Um, I didn't, and then when it was like 30-2 or whatever it was for the score of the Texans Charger, or the Chargers Texans was a blowout. I was like, all right, I don't feel bad about this right now. That's really all I have to say about the Saturday games. Is maybe 7 teams is too many for the NFL playoffs?
Well, it's also interesting for me. It's just like normally you get teams. So like I know this is the obvious example, but the Giants in '08 when they beat the undefeated Patriots, they were like an 8-6 team, and it's like, well, they got like nine of their starting players back healthy after like the second half of the season, like week nine. They were like nine starters came back. There's real no team like that this year. It's like a lot of the teams were just kind of hanging on till the end, and there was no like actual teams that were like sitting players to get healthy and power through. So like I think your seeding, like your playoff seeding really states like you are what you are or whatever. There wasn't like, oh man, just because they're a 6 or 7 seed this year, but they could be a 2 or a 3 seed. There was no teams like that this year. It was like, yeah, the teams who barely got in, and it's really top heavy. Like, and then one other, well, I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead, but the lines this weekend, like I never really seen playoff lines that are like -9, -10, -7.5. So it was just like Vegas definitely didn't think any of the weekends were going to be, any of the games this weekend would be good. So maybe it is 2 versus 7 is too much. And maybe the 4 versus 6 or whatever, because the two teams got buys used to be, right? So it was more even matchups. I don't know. It's tough. It'll probably change from year to year, and it's very what have you done for me now type mentality
Yeah, I mean,
thinking.
I'm
But
sure this is an outlier. Like, I'm not going to judge the entire. I mean, I will say I didn't like when they added the seventh team before, and I certainly don't like it now. Um, but that only affects a couple of the matchups. It doesn't really affect everything. But yeah, I do think there's too many teams in the playoffs now. I don't want it to be like the NBA where everyone gets a trophy, but I just think that it was kind of unlucky. I mean, a lot of people like I know a lot of people thought the Chargers were going to beat the Texans, so that one was kind of a surprise. And Chargers did have a better record, right? Like the Commanders had a better record than the Bucks, but the Bucks were the home team, so like yes, there's a wild card, but all the teams with better records won except for the Chargers. Every other team that had a better record than their opponent in the regular season won the game.
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it's just I think like so like the people can make the argument for the Bengals. Like if they would have gotten in, that would have been a crazy 7 matchup, and like the Bengals Bills or whatever instead of the Bills Broncos or whatever. But like for go back all the way to like week 6, the Bengals lost to the Patriots. Like and they lost some really bad losses. I don't really know if the Bengals would have been that better of a matchup. But I'm agreeing with you. Maybe going down 7 ranks of playoff teams might be a little too far, but watch next year there'll be like a bunch of good 6 and 7 seeds that were just hurt or whatever and got so like who knows. But yeah, what also stood out to me the most was like the divisional winners also, a lot of times it's always like, oh, well, you just in the playoffs because the divisional winner, and it's like a lot of them put up and did really well. But then again, it's like I don't know. It's just very. I don't want to be too much like right now, only thinking like what happened this last weekend. So I'd have to go back and look at other years, but it definitely seemed like a very blah fantasy or football playoffs.
So I did a little quick Google search. So the history of the number 7 season in the NFL, only one. It started in 2020 or after the 2020 season. So we've had 21, 22, 23, 24, and now 25. The only number 7 team to win a game was last year when the Packers beat the number 2 seeded Dallas Cowboys. And that was all started, Aaron Jones went off. They were up like 27-0. It was kind of a blowout. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there was no argument that the Cowboys were theoretically a better team throughout the season than the Packers. So yeah, I think that, and that's going to happen. You're going to have one. So what do we have now? Now we have 2 more to add to this
Right.
soiree. So we've got 2 out of however many of these, or 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 matchups. So 1 in 11, basically. So it's one of those things where I'm with Alex. I would prefer not to have the 7 seed in. And then on the flip side, Mitch, I think the division winner thing is interesting. I would not have thought that the Rams and the Bucks necessarily. Well, the Bucks I think kind of earned it towards the end, but with Godwin being hurt, there was no doubt in my mind that they were 2 of the weaker teams in the NFC playoffs.
Yeah.
And then one proved me kind of right, losing to the Commanders and a rookie quarterback, and then the Rams blew the brakes off of the Vikings.
Yeah, well, you
So it
guys
is
keep
an
jumping ahead. I'm
interesting.
trying to go game by game here, fellas. But yeah,
It's fine.
we can go to that one. No, we can go to that one. So yeah, you guys have been haters on the Rams a lot. I keep telling you that you don't want to play playoff Matt Stafford. down the stretch, Matt Stafford comes alive the last few games of the season in the playoffs, and that's what they did here, and that's what happened. I will say, we talked about Darnold last week about how much he's going to get paid. Talk about playing your way out of a contract. You had a 14-3 now with this 14-4 season effectively, right, which is fantastic, and you were good for probably 15, 16 of those games. Unfortunately, your 2 worst games of the season were the last 2 that mattered. The 2 that are considered playoff games. I know the Vikings-Lions game wasn't a playoff game, but the winner got a bye. The loser had to go play, this past weekend. So it was effectively a playoff game to an extent. It wasn't an elimination game, you know what I mean? Like, it really affected seeding pretty massively. And the 2 games that mattered most, he laid an egg.
Well, I have 3 things really quick. One, so like with the new structure of the playoffs, Philadelphia and Buffalo would have had buys. Am I not correct? 3 years ago, Philadelphia and Buffalo, the 2 seeds, they would have gotten buys, right? Or am I remembering this wrong?
Either Philly or the Vikings, one of the 2.
Yeah, well, Philly was 2 seed, so they would have gotten the bye. But I'm just saying before the playoff reform.
Well, they were the 2 seeds of the division. Oh, you're saying, okay, go ahead.
The top 2 teams had buys, right? Yeah. So it wouldn't have been Green Bay versus Philly this weekend, and it wouldn't have been Buffalo versus Denver. It would have been, just the 6-3 and the 4-5, and they would have seemed a lot closer. But now we're throwing in a 2 seed having to play a 7 seed. So my question is, like, of the Packers and Phillies and then the Denver Buffalo game, did anyone really think the Eagles or the Bills were going to lose those games? And they weren't even really that close. I mean, the score actually showed they were closer than they were, but Green Bay couldn't even move the ball offensively. And then what the other thing is, like, with the Vikings Rams thing, every time Darnold got hit, I was like, there goes a million, there goes a million, there goes a million. And the sad thing is like the difference between 35 to 45 million is probably what he lost in his contract. 45 would have put him up there with Justin Herbert and all those guys, and Tua and David Carr and all that. 35 puts him closer to, like the Rodgers and the Jimmy G and all the mid-level quarterbacks. So I don't know if it really hurt. I mean, I know, who am I to sit here and say 10 million isn't a lot, but it is. He's going to get anywhere from 35 to 45. And the other thing that might happen is he still might get franchise tagged. It might be in the Vikings' best interest to not give him a long-term contract, and he might not get the 4 or 5 years that he wants from another team. People forget that J.J. McCarthy is only 3 years younger than Darnold. So it's like, what's going to happen? I'm not sure. But yeah, watching that game,
Mitch, you there? You cut out.
especially, I don't know why I was rooting for Darnold, but yeah, it just got a little weird. I think something's happening to my internet right now. Take it from me.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's FU money either way. He's gonna get paid. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, there was a chance of him getting. He was gonna get overpaid. I think he'll still get overpaid, but like, he was gonna get big time overpaid. But yeah, I guess since we're just kind of reasoning through all these games, yeah, Eagles Packers game wasn't a contest. Packers turned it over 3 times. The Broncos Bills game, I thought it was going to be good. Going into the half, it was 10-7, but then the second half happened.
Yeah, and then it became what we all thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I actually, kind of looking at this, so it's funny because I was actually bagging on the Bucs Commanders game. Like, I just didn't. I guess for me, I don't think either one of them actually have a shot to even advance to the Super Bowl / like even the championship game. So to me, I thought it was like just a bad matchup on. Okay, it's just whoever plays, possibly the Lions the next round or the Eagles the next round. And that's how I viewed it. But what's funny is that actually ended up being the best game of the week by far. And then, we're sitting here hounding on 2-7 matchups. And why would the NFL put both the Bills game and the Eagles game 2-7 matchups on the same day? Unless they thought something in the spread. But you almost think that they would try to space out who you found would be the better matchups and kind of space them out that way a little bit. But yeah, Sunday football was actually pretty hard to watch. The Eagles-Packers game was absolutely dreadful, kind of the whole game. And I know, like, I don't want to sit here and say it's an offensive league and offense is exciting. But it wasn't even necessarily defense as much. The Eagles were shutting down the Packers, but Jalen Hurts didn't look good. I just felt like both offenses were stalling rather than the defenses were lights out. And sometimes that's kind of hard to watch, So
yeah, well, and when you look at the teams that have made the playoffs, like the teams with the best defenses, like a lot of them did make playoffs. The Broncos, but they got blown out. The Steelers, they got blown out. The Chargers, they got blown out. Like a lot of the good defensive teams got blown out. And then the teams that are supposed to be fun to watch on offense, like the Eagles, kind of puddled along. The Bucks barely piddled along. So it's strange. It was a bit of a strange weekend. I mean, it's kind of everyone. I think everyone who was expected to win won. The only game that I said this last week on the podcast, you weren't excited for Commanders Bucks. I thought it was going to be the most interesting game on the slate, and I was right. Now, full disclosure, I was rooting for the Bucks just because I think they're fun to watch. But the Commanders are also fun to watch. No shade at them. So, the only game I think that Vegas had wrong was the Texans Chargers game. I don't know who Vegas had in this game, but I'm pretty sure everyone was on the Chargers here. Whoops.
Well, I mean, the Texans hadn't really done themselves any favors.
No, they hadn't.
They hadn't really beaten a good team in a while.
They hadn't, and Mixon had really fallen off from the first, 3 quarters of the season where he was a world beater. The last quarter of the season, he did not look very good. So I think those two things kind of combine.
And I think what's interesting actually is, the overall the rookie quarterbacks obviously and the young quarterbacks. I mean, Stroud's a second-year guy. Nick's going to the playoffs. Love, I think, second-year starter. It's actually it was an interesting first round of playoffs if you look at who the quarterbacks were and where they came from. Stroud, second-year guy. Steelers, Russell Wilson getting bounced around. Bo Nix, rookie. Love, still early in his career. Jalen Hurts, everybody bags on him for not being a good passer. Rookie Jaden Daniels, miracle worker Baker, who all of a sudden revived his career. Sam Darnold, same thing. Matt Stafford, who we thought was dead 2 years ago. So it's the playoffs are always fun for me to watch, but this weekend was a little brutal. I do want to say 2 things. One, I will eat crow. I think in my week 1 prediction, I said that no rookie quarterback would throw for like 3,500 yards and they'd all be garbage. I would like to retract that and say Alex was right. Caleb Williams is garbage. And I was wrong. Bo Nix is great. Jaden Daniels is great. They both literally single-handedly led their teams to playoffs. One of them to a playoff win. But I am curious to hear what Alex's take is on his last week's statement where Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings should continue their marriage together.
Well, I mean, I said he cost himself a bunch of money, but it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. So it really just depends on the head coach is going to have to evaluate, and the GM what were the issues in weeks 18 and the wild card round that weren't there the other 17 weeks of the season. Because if they can pinpoint what went wrong, like I know from watching the Rams game, Darnold was scared. You could see some of those sacks he took, there was no reason for him to be back in the pocket that long. He made no effort to get out of the pocket, and he just kind of tucked into a ball and let him sack him because he didn't know where to go. That was someone who's playing scared, and that was lack of experience. So maybe he hasn't been in a big time game pretty much ever. I mean, he's played for some really bad teams, and in college, didn't he play for USC, right? Is that where he played? I can't remember. I gotta look.
Darnold, yes, USC.
Yeah, so he played for USC when they weren't any good, right? So he's never played in a big game. So when you really think about it, his first ever big games of his career were weeks 18 and the wild card round. And look, there are guys that don't rise to the occasion in big games, and that's the stigma they can get. But also there's guys who don't rise to the occasion their first time in the big game, and then once they have some experience, they're better prepared for it the next time around. So it's hard to say. I don't want to sit here and say oh, he's never going to be good in a big game when this is probably the first, I don't know where he played high school ball, but this is the first big game of his college or professional career, from as far as I'm concerned. And so, yeah, it didn't go their way for sure, but they were road games, you know what I mean, for both of them. And maybe if it's a home game next season, then it's a different story, right? Maybe next season he'll have some experience under his belt, he'll be at home more comfortable, and he won't have that kind of footsteps Falco mentality back there in the pocket. So we'll see. But yeah, to answer your question, I still think they should, because I don't know who else is out there they're going to go get, and rookies are a crapshoot. Everyone coming into the draft, oh, Caleb Williams is the guy. Well, we just talked about how there's a couple of rookie QBs who are here in the playoffs, and Caleb Williams didn't sniff it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Right.
the Bears had a lot of issues, but like, did anyone come into the season thinking that the Commanders or Broncos were good football teams? Because I know I didn't. Based on what we saw last year, I didn't think the Broncos were any good. Like, yeah, they had a good defense, but they were terrible on offense, and they had a winning record, made the playoffs. The Commanders, the Commanders are going through quarterback roulette for the last few years. They've never been any good, and no one thought they were going to be any good coming this year. And lo and behold, Terry McLaurin's all of a sudden a stud again. I mean, that's just an older version of himself. It's not like Terry McLaurin was in his second season and got better. Like, no, this is a longtime veteran who finally had a quarterback. So I just feel like
Yeah.
I feel like rookie QBs can make a pretty big difference, and the fact that the Bears didn't see that big difference from Caleb kind of tells me what I think about him. But anyway,
Yeah, no, I think it's yeah. It's I have a couple interesting points kind of based off that. I think we've lost Mitch for the day.
yeah,
If
probably
I'm
that's right.
Yeah, but number one, so talking about the Vikings. So Vikings, this is a fun fact that is not my stat, but something that I read in an article. So they went 14-3 during the regular season, right? We're up until the last week. We're battling for the number one seed in the NFC, which, as we know, the NFC is extremely strong, right?
Yep.
Do you know this is the second time they've lost back-to-back games was week 18 in the playoffs. The other time was I think week 6 and week 7. In week 6, they lost to the Lions. In week 7, they lost to the Rams on the road. In week 18, they lost to the Lions. In the round one of the playoffs, they lost to the Rams on the road. So all of their losses have come in back-to-back games against the Lions, followed by the Rams. And I thought that was just an interesting stat, or kind of like tidbit, rather coincidental.
Yeah, I'd also be curious to know the quality of the pass rush that he faced in his other games this season compared to them, because I know going into the game, the over/under on sack total for the game, not just for one team, but sack total for the game of the Rams-Vikings game was 4.5, and people were saying, "Oh, take the over; it's going to be 4.5 just on one side of the ball." And I think it was 9 times that Darnold got sacked, something crazy like that. So, yeah, if you bet the over, you definitely made that. So I just wonder, like, and again, I do think he was scared back there. I watched it. He shouldn't have taken as many sacks as he did, but I wonder if like that's one of the better pass rushes he's faced this season, and that's what's kind of got him on edge. And I know like when he played the Lions earlier in the season, it was probably before they had all their defensive starters get hurt, so it's possible they still had some hosses back there.
Yeah, and didn't they lose like a Pro Bowl left tackle? I think kind of midway through the season. I think Darisaw is his last name. I'm pretty sure he's a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle who went down mid-season, and then they traded for Cam Robinson. But the offensive line looked really bad the last 2 weeks, and I know Darnold takes a lot of the blame, but man, dude was it wasn't good. Kind of reminded me of back in the day. Do you remember that Monday Night Football game against the Patriots? And they have the mouth reading of him going out there, and he threw a couple pick sixes and couldn't complete a single pass, and I think he said like, "I'm seeing ghosts out there." I feel like he's been seeing ghosts the last couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and we'll see that it's going to be a tricky offseason. So I guess we'll transition here into the offseason. A lot of coaching changes and things going on, which is to be expected. So for those who've been following it, Mike Vrabel was hired by the Patriots to be their head coach after they fired Gerard Mayo. You've also got Mike McCarthy, who the Cowboys did not re-sign, which is really weird because the Bears asked to interview him last week and the Cowboys said no. The Cowboys made no attempt to negotiate with him and then just let his contract expire. And now starting today, I guess, he was free to go and talk to the Bears.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just kind of petty to not let him go talk to somebody. And then the only person that the Cowboys have talked to so far is Deion Sanders, who that's interesting. I don't really see that as being someone that Jerry Jones can control, and Jerry Jones likes to have that control. So yeah, the coaching carousel as always. I do think one interesting point about it, as far as like an interesting head coach option is out there, is Robert Saleh, the coach of the Jets. Everyone put him on blast, right? And then he gets fired. Do you know how good the Jets defense was before versus after he left? So same
No,
team,
I would love to hear this stat.
same team, all the same players. The Jets were top 5 in every defensive category. Points allowed, yards allowed, takeaways, everything. After Robert Saleh got fired, they were 23rd or worse in every category.
Wow.
That's how much of a difference his coaching made. Now, the Jets had a problem. They needed to make some changes, so they fired their coach. That can happen, but I don't think the coach was the problem there. I think it was Aaron Rodgers, and there's bound to be a team out there that just needs a guy to fix the defense, and I think that'd be a pretty good option. Unfortunately, a lot of the available coaching vacancies are the ones that have bad offenses, like the Bears are looking for a quarterback coach. So, the Bears aren't going to look at him, realistically, or at least they shouldn't. But he's a guy that I would definitely be looking at if I were an NFL team looking for a coach and specifically needing something on the defensive side of the ball. That's the guy I'd be looking at.
Yeah, I think the head coaching thing is really interesting. I think we touched on it a little bit last week too. Is not every coordinator makes a good head coach. Some coordinators are just really good coordinators. And I wonder if Robert Saleh is one of those guys that fits into that bucket. Not everybody makes that leap. I mean, obviously they all have to come from somewhere, but not everybody makes that leap successfully. And when you think of the hot candidates out here right now, you've got Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn for the Lions offensive and defensive coordinators. I think Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator for the Ravens, is getting a lot of traction. Cliff Kingsbury. It's one of those things for example, Mike McDaniels, I think, is rumored to possibly be an offensive coordinator candidate again for the Patriots. And he's been very good at the Patriots as offensive coordinator, and we all know how he is as a head coach, especially those that are Broncos and or Raider fans. It is not good. So I wonder if Saleh fits into that group, and then it'll be interesting to see who of the hot head coaching candidates are able to kind of make it out of that burden. And it's always really cool to see guys like Steve Spagnuolo, Vance Joseph. I guess you could say, who's the guy that everybody hated from Miami? Brian Flores. There's these head coaches that go back to those coordinator jobs and absolutely thrive after failed head coaching stints.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of interesting to kind of see how this coaching roulette works out. It's arguably more fun for me than NFL free agency, because NFL free agency is not the most exciting free agency outside of this year, where you have guys like Saquon and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry moving.
But
teams.
I don't even like that, because when they move teams, it makes it so much harder. Perfect example. I was considering Derrick Henry when I took who I took in the draft. I went wide receiver because it's the best wide receiver who was there. But I was considering Henry, but it's he was a new team, and I didn't want to risk it. And it's man, that really blew up in my face. I wish I'd taken Henry. From a fantasy standpoint, I know this episode was going to be fantasy related, but since we're talking about it, from a fantasy standpoint, when these players change teams, it makes it so much harder to know what's going to be good. You know what I mean? Who's going to be the guy? Just looking at the stats here, right? Russell Wilson was a viable fantasy quarterback this year in the games that he played. Last year for the Broncos, no way you'd ever start Russell Wilson, right? Mixon, same thing. He was super mid last year as a Bengal, but this year he was an absolute stud with the Texans. Derrick Henry, absolute stud, but he's always a stud, right? Barkley, absolute stud. All these guys that change teams, and these are the good examples because they're in the playoffs, right? But there's plenty of examples too of guys that changed teams and they did nothing, right? And it's so hard to guess what that's going to be. So NFL free agency from a fantasy perspective, sure, it can be fun for someone like Aaron Jones. We're yeah, free Aaron Jones, and he finally gets freed and goes to a team where he gets to actually carry the ball. But for a lot of guys, it's they might be going to oblivion and disappearing. So.
Well, yeah, and to double down on that too, I mean, how often have we seen running backs either go to a different team and or get traded and then instantly just lose whatever steam they had after that? You've think of some of the higher profile guys that have gone to other teams, whether it be Gurley or it's been LT or Le'Veon Bell. And obviously there's a low-hanging fruit. I don't get to handpick guys that didn't do too well. But we've also been burned by running backs going to new teams after that initial rookie contract. And so it makes it even harder. I think, if anything, 1,000% this is a one-off year. When you think of running backs that went to other teams, you have Saquon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard. I wouldn't necessarily consider any of those a bust based on where they ended up and how they performed. And I don't know if you could say that about any other free agency running back class ever, where your biggest guys went and performed in other cities and on other teams.
Yeah, yeah, that lot of changes, and a lot of the guys that changed were the top guys. Um,
Yeah, but I didn't mean to pivot this off of the coaches, by the way, because I think like you and I both I think kind of agree. Coaching roulette is pretty fun, and since the Raiders do it so often, I feel like we're always invested in it.
yeah. Well, we're invested in, it, and then we're all. I was actually happy about who we hired this season, but that didn't work out. So, but I also like. I don't know how I feel about these coaches only getting 1 year. Like I saw a post today, right? Like so, everyone's talking about how great of a coach the Lions coach is. Like, oh, he's done so well. Like this is amazing. And they're so successful. This coaching style. They won 2 games this first season, right? The next season they were 500. The third season they finally had a winning record, and then this is his fourth season. Like, it takes time. You have to develop the culture, bring in the players. Like, you've got to give guys more than 1 year if you're gonna like sure. There's some people like after the first year you can see hey they just don't have it. Maybe they don't have a grasp of the locker room, whatever. But I just feel like there are a lot of coaches that could be good if they were just given more opportunity. When you're inheriting a dumpster fire and you spend the first year just trying to put the fire out in the dumpster, it's still going to smell like garbage, right? You got to give them some
Right.
seasons to get the burnt trash out of that dumpster and start putting something better in there. So I don't know. I just feel like some of these guys don't get enough of a rub to have a chance.
No, I completely agree. But it is interesting because I've been wondering to hear what your take on this, and I wouldn't normally say your guys's, but since it's funny, I think I just passed all my internet woes to Mitch. What is your take on a good head coach? And how do you think that works? Do you feel like you and it doesn't? Let's say we just have a team where both the offense and defense are average. They don't really have a standout. You're not really sure what direction they're going. So we'll just kind of call it neutral. What do you want? Do you want an offensive-minded coach? Do you want a defensive-minded coach? Do you want a players coach? What do you think fits best in the NFL?
So I think I would prefer to have a defensive-minded head coach with a quality offensive coordinator. I think the problem that I see with a lot of teams that are like always the teams are like, oh, why can't they get over the hump? They're the teams that have like a Mike McCarthy. He's an offensive-minded play caller, so their offense is usually like decent, but if he ever stumbles, the defense can't carry them. Like, and last year, the Cowboys defense did kind of carry them, but every other season they haven't, right? Or guys, that are like Robert Saleh, like, okay, he's a really good defensive coach. The defense is great, but the offense is still garbage because like they're not good at calling plays. They need to have that one really great coordinator to go along with them. And just from what I've seen, it's usually a great offensive coordinator with a defensive-minded coach, a la Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. Like that kind of situation. That seems to work better than the offensive-minded coach with the good defensive coordinator, at least from what I've seen. Right. So I just think if you have to be one or the other, I think the best situations where the head coach is more like managing everything and being a player's coach and letting quality coordinators handle both sides of the ball. But if you have to be one or the other, I want a defensive-minded coach with a good offensive coordinator to go along with it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So what's funny you say that is I actually truly think otherwise, but I may be wrong on this. So now I'm just kind of looking through who the head coaches are, and I looked through their history. So let's kind of go down this list. So Sean Payton, offensive-minded coach, head coach. Bills, Sean McDermott, defensive-minded coach. Packers, offensive-minded coach. Eagles, Nick Sirianni, I want to say defensive-minded coach, but I actually don't know a whole lot about his history. No, offensive coordinator. So offensive-minded coach. Commanders, Dan Quinn, defensive-minded. Bucks, Todd Bowles, defensive-minded. Kevin O'Connell, offensive. Sean McVay, offensive. And then we have Dan Campbell, I guess you would say, offensive, and Andy Reid, offensive. So I'm like, oh, hopefully history proves. But it seems like kind of a mixed bag. Oh, D'Amico Ryans, I skipped over him somehow. Defensive minded. And then Tomlin and Harbaugh, both defensive minded. So it's interesting. I feel like it's 50-50. I personally think when I look at some of these defensive minded guys, so Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, I guess, is offensive, but he's kind of known for his kind of running and defense. He's an ex-quarterback, right? You know, who else was on there? Sean McDermott, Todd Bowles. I guess what I'm trying to Dan Campbell, Dan Quinn. I mean, I see them as players, coaches. Like they take care of their players. Yeah, they're defensive minded, so maybe they bring in that like toughness mentality. But I don't really see them as like defensive gurus. Where on the flip side of that, you have these offensive gurus like Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and Nick Sirianni, where there are these guys that people are like, oh, they're fantastic play callers, or Andy Reid, they call the plays. I think personally you need a player's coach and really good coordinators. Either that or you've got a guy like McVay or, look what McDaniel did in 2 years with a pretty bad Dolphins team. Obviously this year was a down year. It didn't translate with Kingsbury, kind of later on. But I think you either hit the home run with the offensive guy because offense is going to win in current NFL. It just is what it is. Or you have a player's coach with, like you said, really good coordinators. I think personally the key is the Dan Campbells, the Dan Quinns that just can manage an organization and let their coordinators just thrive.
Yeah, I think culture is kind of a big, like, it's a buzzword, but like it's just true, right? Like when you look at it, like, perfect example, the Chargers have pretty much all the same players as last year, but they're an 11-6 team instead of a team that was sub 500, right? The only difference is the coach. He brought in a new culture, right? The Steelers are consistently in the playoffs. Now, they haven't won playoff games. That's a different conversation. But this is a team that, even without having quality play at quarterback, they're always in the playoffs. They're always having a winning record. They've had the same coach for forever. Ravens, same situation, same coach for forever. Broncos, they were a trash can fire. Now they have Sean Payton in his second year, because you got to give him more than 1 year, like I talked about. Sean Payton, now they're in the playoffs with a rookie quarterback. You know what I mean? I just feel like a lot of these guys, they come in, they develop these cultures, and that's what allows them to thrive and move forward. Right, so that's
right.
The biggest offensive minded guru out of all these guys that people thought about. Oh, this is a great offensive minded coach coming into this was the Vikings coach, and look how they did. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And again, that's it's a one off. I'm not saying that should be the standard. Sorry, I realize it's a one off. It's a very small sample size, but I'm just saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. I'll double down on what you said about the Chargers. I actually thought Jim Harbaugh took a worse talented team, losing Keenan Allen, losing Mike Williams, having absolutely nothing but J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards in the backfield. They literally lost their entire offense outside of their offensive line, and were, like you said, an 11-win team. Crazy to me. And then the Steelers were the surprise of the year. I think we can all agree on that. I know Mike Tomlin's been catching a lot of heat. I don't know who makes the decisions on that team. I thought going into the year, Arthur Smith was the worst offensive coordinator hire possible for the Steelers. I think he's a terrible offensive coordinator. He's riding the coattails of those years with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. And outside of that, I don't think he's very good.
If there's somewhere I don't want to have,
he was a dumpster fire in Atlanta.
I don't want to be someone who's, quote, riding the coattails of Ryan Tannehill. That's not where I want to be in my life. I'm just saying, no shade to Ryan, but I'm just saying that's not a wagon I want to, or not an ox I want to hitch my wagon to.
Yeah, and I guess you could say too that he did do pretty well given the circumstances, right? But I mean, he took them. I don't know. Yeah. So, anyways, I think Tomlin is struggling to win in the playoffs, but he is getting some pretty bad football teams, aside from their defense, into the playoffs. Us as Raider fans, I guarantee there is 31 teams outside the Steelers, that would be happy with a guy like Mike Tomlin that gives them a chance every year in the playoffs with the roster he's put together. Give that guy a quarterback and what happens,
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. We've kind of rambled on coaches for a while here. We're going to move on now. Now, Mitch is here twice. You guys can't see this, but we're on Zoom. There were two Vinnies for a while. Now there's two Mitches. neither of which is talking because both their mics are muted. Let's move on to next week. So let's look at the playoff matchups for next week. And I think, and there goes one of the Mitches, and the other one's frozen. Anyway, so we'll start at the top with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Texans. Now the Chiefs, for those who don't know how to buy, so they didn't play last week, and the week before that, they got absolutely lambasted by the Denver Broncos. Now they didn't play anybody, but this is a team, quite frankly, that hasn't looked good all year. I think, Vinny, it was you maybe or Mitch that showed that stat about how bad they were as far as like team go, like all the teams that in a season like that had so few points scored or so few yards or whatever.
Yeah.
They had a winning record, and everyone else was like 3-12.
Yeah, it was points. It was teams that like had like their average points per games or like haven't scored over 30 points on the season or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I don't know what's going on with my internet. Sorry, guys.
Yo. At least he's here.
I shouldn't have talked garbage on my internet because it didn't just full crashed for the last 15 minutes.
Hey, better during the podcast than during a Rust rally, though, right?
I mean, that's very true, but I don't know what a Rust rally is, but I'll go with it.
I just thought you can't have the Chinese yelling at you.
Hey, let's keep our podcast available on all countries just in case we get big here, guys. Let's not get canceled in our 18th episode.
The funny part is with for the Vegas odds on what if I told you what are the top 5 Vegas odds for Super Bowl matchups? So like one of them has a plus 370, plus 500, plus 550, plus 650.
Was this going into the playoffs or with what's remaining?
As of today, what you can bet on.
As of today, what you can bet on?
Yes, so the top 5 most likely matchups for the NFL Super Bowl. So what do you think the number 1 or the lowest odds for the Super Bowl matchup to be is?
The least likely Super Bowl matchup of the remaining...
No, the most likely. Most likely, but
likely.
least paid plus 370, the least odds or whatever.
I think
So
I would have
most
to
likely
say
to
it's
happen.
the 1 seeds. Chiefs and Lions.
I would
the
say
1 seed.
Lions, Bills, personally.
So Chiefs Lions is correct, plus 370. What is the second most likely that Vegas has like the lowest odds? I know I'm saying this wrong.
So this is metagaming, right? So like because you're having this conversation when we are, I'm guessing the Chiefs are in all of them, right? Is that how it's going to be? Like, is this one of those?
No.
I don't know
it's the
because
top
it
5
depends on who has
matchups.
better odds. I would say Lions Bills would be second.
Lions Bills is 4th at plus 550.
Wow. Okay.
Chiefs Eagles is number 2.
Okay.
Okay, people. Yeah, I mean I can see that. People don't have faith in the Lions. I get that.
Ravens Lions is number 3.
Okay. Well, wow. The Bills. Oh my God.
Bills Lions and Bills Eagles is 4 and 5. So Vegas does not like the Bills all that much as I do apparently.
That is pretty interesting. I wouldn't think that that Vegas thought the Eagles had a better chance of getting in than both the Ravens and or Bills over the Chiefs. But that's an interesting stat.
Which I thought was
so I guess
interesting to me was Ravens Lions is 3rd. So if they have Chiefs Lions as 1, why wouldn't like Lions Ravens be 2? You know what I'm trying to say? But Chiefs Eagles is the second best odds. That's so wild to me.
Yeah, it is crazy. I guess on that point then, I think the Texans Chiefs game is going to be better than people probably give it credit for. I do think the Chiefs win. The Chiefs are so hard to knock off until proven otherwise, and they've beaten all these teams already, even this year, while being bad.
Oh, speaking of being bad, another fun coach. We're all over the place, but so we talked about bad coaching hires. The Matt Nagy hire. Have you guys seen that thing about what the Chiefs' offensive stats were the 4 years prior to Nagy versus the 2 since he's gotten there? Like, Mahomes threw for less than 4,000 yards this year, guys. 26 TDs, 11 picks. This was like 5,040 and 7 before Nagy got there, like on average. It was like crazy. Like it's the amount of negative impact he's had on that team is pretty wild.
And he's getting calls and interviews for head coaching positions where I'm like, bro, you drove the Bears into the ground, and apparently the Chiefs into the ground. So I'm trying to figure out who's evaluating all this.
Well, I don't know. I apologize for being gone the last 10, 15 minutes. I apologize. But as far as bad coaching decisions, let's rewind no more than a year ago. People were wondering what Mike McCarthy was going to do if they were going to allow Dan Quinn or Kellen Moore to become the head coach of the Cowboys. Well, they let Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn go and kept Mike McCarthy for another year. And look what Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, and Dan Quinn's the head coach of the Commanders. Look at what they're doing for their respective teams. That's a terrible decision for as coaches. And then back to what you were saying, Vinny, as far as offensive coordinators or defensive minded, I think what happens, and I apologize if this is a repeat, but what happens is to get the OC away from one team to another, you have to give them up, move them up in their career. So moving up from an offensive coordinator would be a head coaching job. This is why the Eric Bieniemy argument for me was so astounding because the way you get someone else's offensive coordinator is by hiring them the head coaching job. Since 2020, 67%, so that's two-thirds of the hirings has been an offensive coordinator. And a lot of these defensive coordinators just got hired like the last year or two. I would have to look back. But I mean, besides that, 67%. So in order to get an offensive coordinator from another team, you're going to have to give them the head coaching job. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're very good head coaches. Because it seems like these defensive coordinators who are just like no nonsense guys can run a team better than an offensive guru can. So it's like I wonder if there's going to be a change in the NFL of mentality of we're just going to pay your OC more than the other OCs, but we're not going to give them a head coaching job to where we might eventually lead into an OC getting more money than a head coach. That might be the trend that we're heading towards. Did I cut out
Yeah.
again? Do I have
No, no, you
internet?
did.
No, no,
Oh, sweet.
no. We're listening.
Uh,
No,
uh,
I think that's a good point. A good expansion on what we talked about already.
Oh, sweet. All right, cool. I didn't repeat anything.
yeah. One more time, we're gonna jump cut, and then we're gonna come back to this. We were talking about fun stats, and I forgot about one more. So we talked about Jordan Love throwing 3 picks in the wild card round and how bad he was. Uh, this is a hilarious stat. This is Jordan Love's career numbers during Toyotathon: 28 TDs, 2 picks. Not during Toyotathon: 29 TDs, 28 picks. So really, it's one of the strangest phenomenons in sports. It's all about Toyotathon, whether or not Jordan Love's any good. So that's kind of like we talked about, potentially Sam Darnold playing in his first big games. Maybe he'll be better. Well, Love kind of sucks down the stretch compared to the beginning of the season. And that's kind of been a trend for him more so than Darnold because Darnold hadn't had an opportunity. So that's concerning. But I just thought that was a funny stat. Like, whoever looked that up, it's just
That's
hilarious.
that's a great stat. I don't know who looks up Toyotathon and NFL stats. That is a desperate tweeter for sure. But that's actually a really good stat. Equal side, the games obviously must be a lot more with 28 touchdowns and 29. So not only is the ratio worse, but the per game
Yeah, I think it's
obviously
like
is terrible.
September, October is Toyotathon, and then November, December, January is the other or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, or if you're talking about interceptions, you can have Herbert throwing interceptions all year and then four in the one playoff game, which two of those were kind of in garbage time, trying to force things, but still, it's crazy how the NFL can happen that way.
Yeah. Oh,
But
keep on the interception bandwagon. Did you guys see the Bucks Commanders game that I talked about? And they talked about how good Baker Mayfield was this season. So
yes,
they had the Buccaneer Pirates surrounded like other pirates and cheerleaders and whatnot, and he's holding up all these signs. It's like over the last 2 years, Baker Mayfield is #1 in touchdowns, is #2 in passing yards, and like all these great stats, and it's like #1 interceptions. He's like, oh crap, and he folds it up and throws it away. So Laser Mayfield has been amazing. He still turns it over a lot, but he's honestly he's the second coming of Brett Favre. I'm just gonna say it. The last couple years, that's what he's been. He's super fun to watch. He makes some crazy plays. He's willing to run and take a hit. Like, he's never going to slide. He's going to run into you. Like, he's the kind of guy you want on your roster. Like, that's the kind of guy I would, like, if I were a lineman, that's the guy I want to block for. You know what I mean? And I just feel like he's super fun to watch, but he does throw a lot of picks. He's very Brett Favre-esque to me, hopefully with less text message scandals.
or did the Bucks just replace Jameis Winston with white Jameis Winston?
I think he's significantly better than Jameis. Like, yes, he does have as many turnovers. I'll give you that, but it's not in the same. But like Jameis had more picks than TDs. Like he was like a 30-30 guy, whereas Baker's more of like a 35-18 guy. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
As much as it pains me to admit it, Baker is a much better game manager than Jameis is. Much better.
Well, that's not a high bar, Mitch. I think any one of us might be a better game manager. All right,
Yeah,
let's
for
get
sure.
back. Let's get back on topic. So
Wait, hold on. Speaking of bad QBs, did you see the thing where Caleb got tricked by the kids pretending to be Ben Johnson?
No.
Yes, I did see that. Oh, Alex, you'll love it.
Dude, that is the most That's more embarrassing than Sam Darnold saying he saw ghosts or whatever, like 5 years ago when they lost to the Jets. He's like, I saw ghosts out there. It's like, well, Sam Darnold might have saw ghosts again this weekend playing the Rams, but nothing as bad as Caleb Williams getting tricked by a bunch of frat kids. Oh my gosh, that is the most embarrassing thing I have seen in sports in many years.
Yeah. It's a good clip, Alex. You should watch it.
All right. Well, just so you guys know, we're an audio podcast, so maybe explaining it would be good for the audience next time. But anyway.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah,
explain
I thought. Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
No, I was just saying Ben Johnson is obviously illegally talking to other teams right now, the coordinator for the Lions. And so obviously there must be going on, and it's got to be behind doors, all these other blah, 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 blah. Well, apparently some number texted Caleb and was like, hey, I'm Ben Johnson. I'm thinking about coming to the Bears. And then like Caleb wrote back all these texts like, yeah, I can't wait. This is going to be so exciting, blah, blah, blah. And then like two frat kids FaceTimed him and called him and were like, oh, the nails are hard, bro. Like you suck and everything. He's like, oh my God. He got totally tricked by two frat kids about whether or not, and like he was texting the kids like real stuff about the Bears. So bad. But
That's awkward. That is
yeah.
awkward. Could be worse though. Could be like our boy that we drafted a while back, Vinny, when we didn't believe he was actually watching tape, Jamarcus Russell, and so they gave him blank tape to go and watch, and he came back and talked about the great blitz packages he watched. So could be worse.
Could be worse.
At least Caleb's watching film, hopefully. Anyway, moving on for real this time. We're not going to get off topic. We're going to talk about this upcoming weekend's matchups. So Texans Chiefs. I think that the Chiefs are a facade. I don't think they're that good. But also the Texans have been really bad up until this past week. So the question is, do the Texans from this last weekend show up again? Or are they going to go back to just being super mid, and the fact that the Chiefs are mid too isn't going to matter? The Chiefs will find a way to win.
I don't think that the Texans are going to be mid. I think the Chiefs are going to make the Texans look mid. I think it's one of those things. I think they're going to get outcoached and outclassed. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs win by 10 plus points this week and shut the Texans down, make Stroud look bad, make the whole offense look bad. I just think the Chiefs, as bad as they are in scoring points and all these close wins and being helped out by the refs, you can't argue what they did on a season-long resume as far as having a great defense and being extremely, extremely well coached. And I think they're going to be prepared for the Texans. I think they're going to. I honestly think it's going to be a blowout. And by blowout, I mean the Chiefs still aren't scoring 30 points, so like 24-7.
Is that just you having faith in the Chiefs' defense then? Because their defense has been good, even though their offense has been terrible.
Yeah, I think they're just going to out-scheme the Texans. I think.
Gotcha.
And I think Andy Reid is going to find the holes in the defense and figure out ways to shut down Anderson and Singletary and things like that on defense.
I know it's a new year and everything, so like anything can happen, but like let's not forget this team has won how many Super Bowls in the last 5 years, has been to how many Super Bowls in the last 5 years, and they have like 2 losses this year, technically 2, but it should have been just 1. They didn't even play anyone in the Broncos. I don't think the Texans are going to be the team to finally knock the Chiefs in Arrowhead off their pedestal. There's so much that I cannot see it happen. And this might be metagaming, like you said earlier, or whatever. But it's just like in any game you play or any, whatever, it's like it's not going to be this person who finally beats them. I just don't see it.
No, and I'm with you there too. I think the Chiefs are a pretender this year. But I don't think the Texans are the ones to unveil the mask. I think the Chiefs are going to get the W here at home. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to go all the way, although, I mean, that's going to come down to who wins Ravens-Bills. We'll talk about that in a minute. Moving on to the next game, Commanders-Lions. This game could be fun to watch. Couple of coaches that are willing to risk it. Couple of exciting offenses to watch. I mean, obviously the Lions are the favorite, but at the end of the day, they're still the Detroit Lions. Do the Lions actually live up to how well they played all season, or do they fall back down to earth?
For me, no.
Well, in general, just so you guys know the format of the podcast, when the host asks a question, usually one of you guys would answer it. Yes.
I was waiting. I was trying to give Vinny the leeway here. I'm having internet issues, but for as far as Lions Commanders, I think it's like -9.5. And again, I think I said earlier in the podcast when I was not having the internet, it's like I think like I've never really seen Lions this big before, and also just me personally, the Lions. Everyone's like, oh, well, they're missing like 8 starters or whatever, 9 starters, which is crazy. But like, if you forget that piece of information and just take that out and say this is the roster that's going into the playoffs, that team's still the most talented team on paper out of anyone in the NFL. So it's like, yeah, maybe those 8 injuries or 9 starters or whatever is allowing the rest of the league to actually have a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. But I just do not see if the Lions lose to the Commanders, that'll be one of the biggest upsets I've seen in in a decade probably. Like I don't. It's just that team is like the most stacked team I've seen in forever. I don't even think the Eagles have a realistic chance of beating the Lions, to be honest. But that's just me personally.
And to your point, Mitch, last week we talked about which team had the most to lose if they lost in the wild card round, and in my case was that I thought the Eagles were the team that they had the most to lose if they lost. I think this week, who has the most to lose? You kind of have to look at the Lions for if they have this amazing season, if they show up and get beaten by a wild card team at home with a rookie quarterback, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. You also mentioned all their injuries. They are starting to get guys back. They got Anzalone back, not last week, but 2 weeks ago. And then there were reports that David Montgomery might be able to play for the divisional round. Now, that could just be the team floating it out there so the defense tries to prepare for him, even though he can't actually go. But that's because he's kind of the only piece they're missing on offense. They're missing a ton on defense, but on offense, the only piece they're really missing is Montgomery. So that could be interesting as well. Vinny, what about you?
I think it's a blowout. This goes back to what I said last week or earlier, where I was talking about last week's games. Why the NFL would put 2 trash games on the same day. I think this is another blowout. The Commanders don't have a single statement win throughout the season outside of beating the Bengals early on. They beat the rush-led Cowboys, not even Trey Lance, by 4. They beat the Falcons with Michael Penix's first start. They beat the Eagles by 3 with Kenny Pickett. They beat the Saints by 1. They blew out the Titans. They lost to Cooper Rush and the Commanders.
Did they beat the Ravens? I can't remember.
No, they lost to the Ravens. So they've played some close games, but I don't think they have a single. They lost the Steelers and Russell Wilson. They beat trash teams. They haven't beat anybody. I think they lose by 14 plus.
I think their defense is very hot and cold. There are some games where their defense plays really well, like they did in the wild card round. There's also some games where their defense just doesn't show up. And the Lions' offense is so potent that I think their defense needs to have their best game of the season to have a chance. I'm with you guys. I think the Lions win this, but I do think if there were an upset this weekend, this would be the biggest one as far as like shaking up like a team that really needed the W. I think the Lions have the most to lose by losing this game.
Oh, the Lions easily have the most to lose.
All right, moving on to the next game, Rams-Eagles. Now, on paper, like the Eagles should win this, but like I said, the Rams get hot at the right time. Like if you look at the stats over here on the right, like Stafford, less than 4,000 yards, only 20 TDs. This is a bad season. That's not a season I want. But when you look at what they are in the games that mattered down the stretch in the game last week, that's what's more what's the word, like gives you hope. I can't think of the right word for it, but like it gives you that little glimmer. Maybe there's a chance. That being said, the Eagles are probably one of the best defenses left in the playoffs. I would say them and the Chiefs probably have the best defenses left in the playoffs. In the NFC, I think they're the best defense remaining because of the Lions' injuries. The Lions had a good defense, a lot of injuries. So I would say they are kind of up against a pretty stout defense. So we'll see how Stafford does against a stout defense. But yeah, I don't know. I think both teams could win this, but I think I'd have to take the Eagles, especially at home. What do you guys think?
I think the Eagles pull it off, but this would be the one realistic upset, in my opinion, that could happen.
No way.
And I just think that you would never believe it. There's nothing that says that the Rams should win this game, They beat the Bills earlier in the year. If you look at how their defense has played basically the last few weeks outside of that game, I mean, these aren't great teams, but they held the Cardinals to 9, the Jets to 9, the Niners to 6, the Vikings to 9, and then they benched everybody and lost to the Seahawks, 30-25 in Week 18. But when their starters have played over the last 4 games, they haven't given up more than 10 points. And then the week right before that, where the defense got hot, they beat the Bills 44-42. I just think they have the potential. They shouldn't. They shouldn't beat the Eagles. But I think there's a realistic chance. I think the Rams are one of those teams. They give off giant vibes. They give off that we are well coached. We know our identity. And if our defense plays good, we have a chance. And
So that's the concern I have is, first of all, don't tell anybody. But if Fangio and that defense doesn't have a turnover over, that's my fantasy D for next year that I'm targeting in every league. Second of all, I think the Rams' biggest weapon is their front seven and the way they can put pressure up that B gap or whatever. Well, now you're going up against the number one offensive line in football, and it's like not even close. I mean, I guess the Lions do have a top O line, but the Eagles O line just moves people. If someone told me that Saquon Barkley is going to get 19 carries this game, there is no way in any earth or any reality that I would even just entertain the fact that the Rams have a chance to win this game. Just tell me right now that they're going to give Barkley 19 carries, and I'm not even going to watch the game. That's just locked up and done. The Rams' front seven could put pressure, but it's not going to matter when that offensive line is just moving you for Barkley all game. Like, I don't even see, even if Hurts has a terrible game, I still can't see the Rams overcoming it. You have a top 2 defense in the league, plus Barkley in that O-line, that will win you a Super Bowl in the NFL many years. I just don't like. If the Lions weren't so stacked, the Eagles would be my dark horse to win it. Not even close. But I could be a little biased towards Barkley. But at the same time, like if you like, I don't want to repeat myself. I'm going to just tell me right now that the Eagles are going to give Barkley 19 attempts, and I'm not even going to watch the game. I'll probably play Rust or whatever.
Right. So here's my counter argument though, because we had Vinny read off some scores to undercut another team's wins, with the Commanders. Well, the Eagles lost to the Falcons. They barely beat the Saints by 3. They barely beat the Browns by 4. They barely beat the Jaguars by 5. These are awful teams that I'm mentioning, by the way. They barely beat the Panthers by 6. These are one-score games against a bunch of terrible teams. They lost to the Commanders. Beat the Giants by a touchdown. That one didn't really count because they didn't play their starters. But there are a lot of games they played this year that didn't go the way people thought it would be for this team. So, and there's been games where, Saquon's been great, but there's been games where Jalen Hurts threw for like 125 yards and that's it, right? So
right.
if that front seven can contain him, there's a chance. Again, I'm not saying I'm predicting an upset. So far, I'm taking chalk. I'm taking Chiefs, Lions, and Eagles, but I'm with Vinny. Of these 3, I think the Rams have the most realistic chance of pulling off the upset.
Oh wow!
I would say Texans. I just have no faith in it. I don't trust the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are fake, but I have no faith in the Texans. So, and the Lions should win this easily. So I think of all these games, because I don't think this one's going to be an upset. We haven't talked about this. I think this one, I don't think either team winning would be an upset for this game. So I can't really call out an upset. So if there's going to be an upset, I think it's be the Rams. So again, I think the Eagles will win. Mitch, I'm with you there. I do understand all your logic behind it. Yes, it makes sense, but the thing about the NFL is it's not like in the NBA where you play a best of 7. This is a best of 1, and in a best of 1, you just need one time, right? And I think the Rams can do it. But let's move on to the last game here. Ravens Bills. This is the slobber knocker that everyone wants to be a good game. We all really hope it is. We hope it's shades of Bills Chiefs from a few years ago, right? That amazing shootout game that went to overtime. That's what we're wanting to see here. The 2 MVP candidates going head to head. What's your take on this one, boys?
I'm afraid it's not going to be as good as people think because both offensive coordinators are going to probably try and keep the ball out of the other team's hands. I think we're going to get a lot of Derrick Henry and a lot of James Cook. I don't know if it's going to be as wild as we think it is. It'll probably still be close. But at the same time, this one I'll recuse myself or excuse myself, whatever the word is, because I have a lot of bias in this. Lamar and Allen are my 2 favorite guys in the last 5 years. The winner of this game better win the Super Bowl or I'm going to be a little sad.
Well, you got to pick one. You can't cop out on this show. You got to pick.
Okay,
somebody.
well, I'm gonna pick the Bills. just because I can rely more on their secondary. The Ravens are one injury away from Hamilton, or what's his name, the other guy I forget, and that secondary is like the worst thing you've seen in a decade. So as long as Hamilton and the other guy's healthy, Noy or whatever, then it'll be close. But I can trust the Bills' defense more. But as far as what you were saying earlier, Alex, that one play, that one thing, that best, not a best of seven, that's literally Josh Allen's Achilles heel for the last three postseasons. He is one bad throw or one bad fumble away from going to three straight Super Bowls. Like every time, it's always that one play that knocks him out. And that's what I'm most worried about in this game is the Bills might be the best team by far in the NFL. I mean, best chances of winning, in my opinion. But I think the only reason Vegas and other people is because we can't trust Josh Allen in the postseason. He always does too much in the postseason, and it's one fumble, one interception that cost him against the Chiefs. Like people forget the last 4 years, the Bills have played the Chiefs 3 out of the last 4 years, and so it's like if they didn't have the Chiefs, let's pretend Mahomes and the Chiefs didn't exist and Andy Reid, the Bills are in 4 or 5 straight Super Bowls, like 4 of the last 5. Because
Yeah, I
all
mean,
they
and
lose
this is a
is the
franchise that
Chiefs.
once went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost them all, right? So
Right.
the Bills don't have the best luck in the postseason for sure. I will say, like in Josh Allen's defense, it's because he has to do it all. Like there's always things lacking around him, so he kind of feels like he has to do it
Sure.
all. And like a lot of times, like yeah,
Sure.
he made that bad play and he lost the game, but he scored 38 points before he made that bad play. You know what I mean? I feel
That's a
like
good point.
at some point it's on the defense there. Do you think that the lack of Zay Flowers in this game, because Flowers got hurt, I don't think he's going to play, and he is the Ravens' leading receiver, how big of a difference does that make on this game?
Uh, That's a great question. I don't think Zay Flowers is much of a defensive schemer. So like I don't think defenses are going, we need to put, rotate a linebacker or put a safety over the top or any of that kind of stuff with Zay Flowers. I don't really know if it's I mean Zay Flowers might be able to beat a corner better than a lot of other wide receivers, but I don't know if it's really a game changer to be honest.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because like when you think about the top wide receivers on like the
Yep,
top
yep.
pass catch, like, not wide receiver, the top pass catching threats on the Ravens, it's
Yeah.
Flowers, Mark Andrews, and Isaiah
Likely, yeah.
Likely, and the other two are tight ends. Tight ends and wide receivers, especially wide receivers like Zay Flowers, don't run the same routes. So there's definitely a chance you're going to be missing those routes because then you're going to have to go to Rashad Bateman, who like yes he's very fast, but he also kind of has some drop problems. Vinny, what about you? What's your take on this game? This is the hot game here of the weekend.
Yeah, I think I honestly I think you said it perfectly when you're like I don't think either game is an upset. If someone could pick one of these teams with confidence, I would love to know what they were looking at. If they were right and they're like, oh, I knew it was X Y Z. It's a coin flip for me. It's so tough. It look like you just said. Look at who the Bills have at wide receiver, and to think that they are where they are. I was curious of their offense. They scored the second most points in the league behind the Lions, and then they were like 10th in yards, where obviously the Ravens were number one. I think at home, neither one has really won the big statement game. I would have to take the Bills. I think the Bills have just been tested more this year. I think they've beaten some better teams across the season. I don't feel like at any point in time the Bills' season was in jeopardy where, the Ravens kind of really had to rally and win a whole bunch to even catch the Steelers. I just think the Bills are a better overall football team, and I may eat crow for that because the Ravens
No,
have
they
the
are.
potential to blow them out.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are better offensively. The Bills are better defensively. I will say though, Mitch brought up the fact that like Josh Allen makes that crucial mistake. Well,
Right.
Lamar Jackson does not have a good track record in the playoffs either. Like the
For sure.
playoffs has not been his friend. So I mean, obviously they won last week, but it's a new week, new things can happen. As you can see here, Vegas has the Ravens winning. And for those who don't know, when you're giving odds, you generally get 3 points for being the home team. So if this were on a neutral field, that means Vegas thinks the Ravens are 4 points better than the Bills. This isn't a neutral field, but I'm saying if they were.
Right.
When you look at the rest of these spreads, right? Like they've got Kansas City by 8.5, Detroit by 9.5, Philly by 6.5. This is a 1 point game. So this is the game to watch this weekend. I really hope it's not a blowout one way or the other. It'd really stink if one team just shows up and lays an egg. But this one should be the exciting one to watch.
So
Yeah,
just
and
amuse me,
to
bro. Yes, I
Go ahead. No, I just
No,
wanted to
mine's
counter
gonna take
you really
second.
quick, and then I'll amuse you. Is Josh Allen makes the mistake. That team has had 2 fumbles all year, 6 interceptions. The Bills have 8 turnovers on the year. Um, I mean, the Ravens are actually pretty close with 11. So I think both of these teams aren't very mistake prone. It's interesting. In shameless plug here, I think what Josh Allen has done with the Bills and his team, regardless of stats that Lamar has put up that are breaking records, the Bills, Josh Allen is MVP. There is no question in my mind that what he's done with the Bills is one of the most impressive things I've seen in NFL in a long time. And I don't really care for Josh Allen. I think he's overrated, and he shut me up this year. So I'm gonna ride with Josh Allen and the Bills
Yeah,
until they fall off.
I mean, first of all, I mean, you're both wrong. The MVP this year is Joe Burrow. But I digress. I know they won't give it to him because he didn't make the playoffs, but good Lord, that guy had a season. I will say that I think of the two, Allen is more deserving, not because Lamar didn't play great, but Josh Allen didn't have a 2,000-yard running back behind him. People sleep on the fact that Derrick Henry ran for over 1,900 yards this year because Saquon got 2,000, right?
That was a casual 1,900 yards
Yeah,
too.
just
That was
just
very
super
casual.
like no, like hey guys, by the way, BT Dubs, my boy
BT
Derek,
does. Wait, all right. So 2 things real quick.
and that was
One,
on 20 less carries. But I want to point that out. He had 20 less carries than Saquon Barkley.
yeah.
So had he got the same number of carries, he would have rushed for more yards than Barkley. Like he had a higher yards per carry than Saquon.
His yards per carry was higher.
Yeah.
One, back to your -3 point, Alex. Like the Rams had to play on a neutral field and still did that to the Vikings. That's embarrassing. But back to the Ravens Bills. The interesting thing for me is just muse me real quick. Like because Vinny said earlier, like I don't know how anyone knows one team's better than the other. But all right, so let's just go real quick. Offensive line of the Ravens versus the defensive line of the Bills. Who has the advantage?
I have to go to the Ravens.
You think
Yeah,
the
I'd probably
Ravens
go with the
offensive
Ravens.
line is better than the Bills D line? Okay, what about flip it? The Bills O line versus the Ravens D line.
Same thing. I think I'm thinking the
I'm gonna
O-line
have to go with the
in both
Bills.
cases.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the offensive line.
When you consider how I'm speaking from a run blocking standpoint more than a pass blocking standpoint because from a run blocking standpoint, both of these teams had very successful running backs and very successful running quarterbacks this year. So both of these teams know how to run block. As far as pass blocking goes, both these teams have quarterbacks who can run, so the ability to scramble, even if the pass blocking isn't as good. And I'm not saying it's not. I don't know how to quantify that as well because I'm not an NFL scout that watches O lines. But I just think that I don't think the line play is going to be as big of a matchup as it would be normally just because of how good these teams are at what they do. I think this is going to come down to who makes the mistake or who has the ball last.
Or it could just be like the Chiefs like 2 years ago, whereas whoever had the ball last for sure. I agree with you because everyone's just going to score every possession. But on that note, just real quick, just to finish out the conversation, who do you like better, the Bills receiving core or the Ravens secondary?
See that I think that's why this is so hard to call because the Bills receiving core is a bunch of nobodies, but the Ravens secondary was pretty lousy this year. Like coming into the season, there was some hype around the Ravens defense. That hype was not real. The Ravens defense was not a good defensive football team. And so the Bills have a bunch of rookies and a bunch of no names out there, but it's not like they're going up against the best secondary in football either. So I think it's going to be kind of like backyard football out there.
What about Bills secondary? Bills secondary versus the Ravens receiving core.
Bills secondary all the way, especially even
that's where I think the difference.
Even if Zay Flowers played, I would still take the Bills secondary.
That's where I think the biggest difference is going to come in. I think the Ravens are actually going to have to do a lot more work to score than we realize. I think I might be biased, and the Ravens have crazy offense, but I'm going to stop talking about it because I might just be hoping that the Bills will pull through on this one. And by the way, again, whoever wins this game better win the Super Bowl, please.
All right,
please.
Let's end on that then. So I'm going to ask you guys both. I want to know, based on the teams that are left, what do you think will be the Super Bowl matchup, and what would be your dream Super Bowl matchup? So, first I want to know what you, as a quote-unquote expert, who you think will be the two teams left in the Super Bowl, and then I want, instead of picking with your brain, pick with your heart, who are the two teams that you want to see in the Super Bowl? So,
okay, so
Vinny, I'll let you go first. Vinny, you go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that's so hard. I'm gonna take a cheap out and I think it's going to be Eagles Chiefs, and I just think that their defenses are built better for it.
And who's
And
taking it
defenses
down?
in the playoffs. So, oh, God. Let's go with the Eagles. Saquon brings a Super Bowl to Philly.
All right, yeah, the Giants will love that. And then, so that's what you think will happen. What's your dream match? If you got to pick of the remaining teams, what would you want?
Lions Ravens would just be an absolute shootout, and I think the Super Bowl deserves a shootout.
And
The Lions
would
Bills
you
though
care
was
who wins that? Like, do you have a
I
preference?
think it'd be really cool to see the Lions win.
Yeah.
I'm a big Dan Campbell guy. Every time I see him in an interview, I'm just like, damn, I would love to play for this guy. This guy's incredible. So Lions Ravens, Lions take the win would be my ideal situation.
All right, Mitch. What about you? First up, who do you
so
think will be there?
the Lions had 2 losses on the season, and the Chiefs had one, but technically two because of the last game of the season. But let's not count the Broncos' last game of the season where they didn't play anyone. So out of the 3 losses between the Chiefs, 1 loss, and the Lions, two, who beat the Lions and the Chiefs?
Well, the
The
Lions lost
Bills.
to the Chiefs.
The Bills. The Bills put 1 loss on the Lions and put 1 loss on the Chiefs. I really don't. The Bills better go to the Super Bowl. I think the Bills are going to go to the Super Bowl. And then it's definitely Lions or Eagles. I'll go with the Lions are the most statistical team. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be Bills Lions, but I would and remember, if you go back 4 weeks ago, the Bills Lions game was fantastic to watch, that Bills Lions game. So I know the Bills ended up squeaking the win at the end there, but again, this has to be the Bills. And the Ravens upset it. If the Ravens don't go, I'm going to be upset. So what I want to happen is whatever between the Bills Ravens, that team wins the Super Bowl. What I think will happen will be Bills Lions.
So you think it'll be Bills Lions, and you want it to be Bills who?
I want it to be, I don't really care, Bills whoever and Bills win, or Ravens whoever and Ravens win. That's what I want. I don't really care who makes it on the NFC side. What I
Okay.
want to happen is just whoever wins between theRavens or Bills, they better win the Super Bowl.
Well, you should care because the Bills. You talk about who has losses. Well, the Bills have 4 losses this year. You want to know who those 4 losses are to?
Who?
The Ravens, who they play this week, the
Yeah.
Texans, who they might play next week, and the Rams, who they might play in the Super Bowl. Three of the four
Not playing
teams.
the Rams.
3 of the 4 teams who beat the Bills this year are in the playoffs, still going. So just worth noting if we're going to use that argument. But fair enough. All right, and I'll give mine too. Who do I think it's going to be? Man, I hate picking against the Lions, but I feel like you got to show me first. So I'm going to say that I think it's going to be the Eagles and the Bills. I want it to be Lions and Ravens. Yeah, I just think that'd be fun to watch. Like when he said, I mean, honestly, Lions anybody's going to be fun to watch. To be honest with you, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, anyone have any final thoughts? We got to close this up here, guys.
No, I was just, and I know I'm trying to wrap it up, and also, I guess the Eagles and Chiefs. I guess I'm wrong. I thought the last few Super Bowls were kind of a defensive matchup, and I guess I'm just tainted by like the 13-3 Patriots Rams that we had, and the 31-9, Chiefs and Bucks and stuff like that. But I don't know why I want a shootout, but because apparently the last few Super Bowls have been a shootout, so I'm wrong on that.
Well,
Shootouts are just fun to watch, right? Like that has nothing to do with. They're just more fun to watch. Even when 2 teams are good defensively, like we talked about, the Rams and Bills both have good defenses and somehow played a 44-42 game, right? That game was super fun to watch. Like, yeah, it meant that their good defenses didn't play great, but it was super fun to watch. But yeah, we got to wrap this up though. Mitch, Vinny, any final thoughts before we say goodbye here?
No, it's just basically in the last 5 years, the Rams have been the 2 Super Bowls, the Chiefs have been the 4, and the Eagles have been the 2. So if we go Chiefs Eagles, it's just boring.
Or Chiefs Rams.
Boring.
So, all right. Well,
Yeah, boring, but it's there. There's a lot of superstar power left. I'll just say that. I think that's a cool thing. If the Eagles do make it, ton of superstars. If the Ravens make it, you have Lamar and Henry. If you have the Lions make it, my good God, with their offense
from
and Gibbs
a
and
rating
St.
standpoint,
Brown.
I feel like the NFL is just sitting at home going, not the Texans, not the Texans.
For
I
real.
think everything else from a rating standpoint will do great. but not then. All right, thank you everyone for listening. That's our show for today. We'll be back next week with a more brilliant analysis as always, because we exactly know what we're talking about. We never get anything wrong, especially me. Later, everybody. Peace out.
See ya.